3, 2, 1.
Good morning.
Hey.
Happy Monday, everyone.
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias. Today is Monday, October, 25th? And this is Talent Talk. We normally have an affiliate, but we have a guest host that is actually going to be bringing us a lot of information. Actually, we're going to have great conversation, and it's going to be about diversity today. With that in mind, you saw the bumper, and that was actually our introduction for Fridays. We are going to rework that. And you know what? We came on, it's 8:24 right now. And I looked at it because we always go live at 8:30 on Friday. I was like, hey, wait, well, hold on. We're actually 5 minutes early. Oh, no, we're not.
No, we're not.
Just another Monday morning.
Yeah. Wasn't there a song about that?
Yeah, it feels like a Bengals song. Just another Manic Monday.
I can't lie, that did pop in my head when you said that. It's like,
I think I just reworked the lyrics in my head and just actually got them wrong, which is pretty
okay. Well, you know what? When we're running behind, it could be a Panic Monday too. So
okay. At least it's all just in your head. That's how it normally always is. It's just in our head.
Panic in the Disco.
Yeah.
So you know what? What we're going to talk about, we had a guest lined up, and as this is live and as things happen, unfortunately, our guest wasn't able to make it with us. But what we were going to end up talking about is something really that has come to the forefront over the past year and a half, and it's talking about DEI. And Josh, you were actually engaged. This is Josh Heisen. He's from our Olympia office, and he has been leading some conversations with Thurston County realtors on DEI. So what is that, Josh?
So that work is generally thought of to be kind of the tip of the spear for a lot of organizations to start bringing conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And how do we create safe workplaces, safe organizations that can have these conversations where we can do a little introspection for ourselves in, what is our part in this, and how can we be? Really, it's about vulnerability. And if you look, if you listen to Brene Brown, which I'm a big fan of hers, and her podcast and her books, and because it's really the key to this whole work is to be able to step back and say, okay, instead of being defensive, really look into how, like, my actions and my words are playing into this overall piece of society that we're kind of in, that we're going through. And it's a long process. And it's not something that can be fixed, in a week. It's just something we need to continually have a conversation about and continue to work through. And so, our committee in Thurston County is just trying to bring together people to have conversations about it.
Oh, you said that like you know what you're talking about.
I've done a little training. Living a number of years in San Francisco and Oakland, where this conversation has been really at the forefront of a lot of organizations and city councils and statewide, election, not to get too far into politics, but it's something that, people especially in Oakland and areas around there are really trying to have with city and state and within organizations, because they know how important it is. And it's, especially within race, how detrimental that has been, that the oppression has been for home ownership, and it's happened even in Washington.
It's happened all across the whole U.S.
Yeah, it has. One of the things that Josh, you have, and this is so awesome, and this is so timely, and so glad that you're here too, is that we in Thurston County, specifically in the Thurston County Realtors Association. I mean, the Realtors Association has had a diversity, um, it has over the years has talked about diversity, but since the last year and a half, as you mentioned, a lot of organizations are making sure there's a focus and that there is intention. But there can always be lots of conversation, but no wheels necessarily turning, just because a
Mhm.
lot of people really don't know what to do, how to have a conversation, how to actually make a difference, and I think the difference comes in we're all going to get together. We don't necessarily know what to do, but we just need to talk about it and we need to start doing something, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that is one of the things right now that Thurston County is really heavily dipping their feet in regards to the Realtor Association. And you are now, congratulations, have been announced just within the last, week as officially the chair of the Committee for Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity for the Thurston County Realtor Association. So congratulations.
Unofficially official. Not
Unofficially official.
unofficial.
Okay. Unofficially official.
They've asked me, I've accepted, and we're kind of working
through.
Yeah.
So you're wearing the hat. You may not have the official badge, but you are putting those boxing gloves and doing it. So just there was an event, and let's talk about that real quick, because there was an event and it was a pretty good success, I would say, about just realtors and people in the industry getting together to just talk.
Yep. Yeah, we had an event. It was held outside, and at the Huber Guest House, and in here in Olympia, and they normally have, it's a venue for weddings and parties and things, but this was a great outdoor tented event where we watched a video on housing, and Dr. Taylor basically spoke, to realtors. It was a video that was made a year ago for during the pandemic, when everyone was quarantining and away, and it was really enlightening to see how that has been affected by, how it's affected the housing market and home ownership. And it's just a great place to start conversation. It was a great attendance. We started thinking about, having a book club, and what we wanted to do, and thanks to Davina, actually, when she kind of brought this idea, was to lower the bar of entrance, okay, just show up and let's watch a video and intake, something, about how, like, as realtors, we know a lot about real estate and how it's progressed over time. And now let's put the lens of race on that. And it is, really telling when you start to look at facts and figures and how he kind of broke it down. Dr. Taylor broke it down about how that has affected Washington. And, you think as Washington as a relatively progressive state, and, now that, like, the rest of the country is also dealing with a lot of these, as demographics change, a lot of these issues. So, but we broke into groups, and it was very, very accepting of everybody's opinion and their own experience, right? And I think that's the important part about this work, is being able to share from your own experience and be vulnerable in that space to say, I don't see it this way. And then, but being willing to learn and see that. And we're not just looking at race as well. This committee is also looking at LGBTQ plus, and other forms of discrimination that's happened, and disability. And so we're trying to include all of that into our thinking about DEI work.
Yeah, and as you're talking about, I mean, DEI in and of itself just shows that it's open to more than that. I mean, there's diversity, which oftentimes is kind of on the racial side of things, and then when you also include the equity and inclusion, that's it's really trying to encompass a much more open mindset all around, which is incredible. And who knew we would be even in these conversations, pre-pandemic. I mean, everybody was still going about their way. I know my mindset is really different than it was pre-pandemic, just because we've had to have these conversations, because it's really a part of a national conversation. And David, when you mentioned about, it's a really strong look that we're having in Thurston County about this. It's really part of the broader conversation, though. I mean, the whole Realtor Association has, with designations like the At Home with Diversity, even within John L. Scott, we have a diversity leader within there. Lennox Scott, CEO, grandson of the original John L. Scott, has taken such a leadership role with so many initiatives, even clearing up helping to clear up the CCNRs, the restrictions, the covenants and restrictions that are, wow, you read through some of those, you wonder how that could ever have happened, right?
It was the 40s, 50s, 30s.
Yeah. It went even beyond then.
Tens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're still on they're still with the county records, even though they can't be enforced. But I mean, you have neighborhoods that are, if you look at the CCNRs, restrict in terms that we wouldn't even use to describe people, restricting certain people from being able to own or reside in certain neighborhoods.
Yeah. And I think part of that is just acknowledgement that that's happened.
Yeah.
Right. The acknowledgement's the first step, right? Just say, hey, this action was detrimental to certain groups, and how do we, and then the next step is like, okay, how do we, kind of heal that, because there has to be a lot of healing within that space. And then how do we move forward to create equity? Because everybody deserves to have the option to, if you work hard and you're responsible with money and you do the right things, you should be able to own a home. And I think that's something that is intrinsic to generational wealth and passing things on to your kids and having them step up and maybe attend university or get a master. Like it's part of the building blocks of creating, this American dream that, we all kind of want to have.
Yeah. And we want it to be open for all people.
Yeah.
One of the things, and if you have not, so the At Home with Diversity designation, there is a requirement for, so one of the things that is definitely different is that the requirement for us as realtors to actually take these classes as to be part of relocation, or there are requirements now that we have to do, because the thing is, diversity is a fact. It's a fact that we are diverse, and whether we're talking about race, religion, creed, disabilities, gender, sexual preference. I mean, we are a diverse group of people in regards to our backgrounds and our experiences. And here's the thing, that we could have the same, we can live in the same area, we can grow up in different areas, we can have, but the thing is we all have different experiences, or we have different takes on what each of our experiences are. And everyone has an experience. And it's really interesting that depending on what your experience has been, we all can have a conversation, regardless if you feel like, I haven't had any experience, I don't even know what people are talking about, does this really exist? Or, man, I've been through it, I see it, I'm angry. No matter what side of the fence you're on, the conversation can be so productive if we just talk about, experiences and embrace the differences and the experiences. And I think that's what this whole obviously the pandemic and then all of the things that have happened within this last year and a half have opened up, and it's become very charged. But I think if we can just roll back and embrace the fact that we all bleed the same blood, we have different experiences, and we need to embrace those instead of talking about, okay, how
Here,
how
hey,
how different things have been and how
Davina?
hurt we are. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, with that in mind, I mean, there's a lot that gets talked about, and when we talk about it in very broad terms, it can go over a lot of people's heads because we're stuck in our words, our own
Hmm.
worlds, and we're stuck. We do get caught in our own ways of thinking and
Hmm.
what's acceptable in a moment without always looking outside. What might be interesting is we have fairly diverse, and also just good morning to Donna there. Um, we all have some level of experience. Actually, what we have represented on the screen is a really rather diverse panel here.
Hmm.
And Josh, you step forward into what you're doing. Steve, you have a really interesting background because of not only you've culture from a heritage side, you have one, but from a cultural side, you have another. And then Davina, you've been able to go through, and a lot of these things have surprised you in terms of how the conversation took and even some of your experiences. Just out of curiosity, as this has become a part of the conversation, it really has changed the focus of what's been going on. Is there anything that any of you can think about as to how this has either changed your thinking, reinforced your thinking, or brought about a change in the way you approach things? Like maybe Josh, since you're really actively engaged right now,
Mhm.
like what is it for you? And has there been an experience that stood out for you during this time?
Well, this process for me started before the pandemic, right? So when I was in Oakland 3 or 4 years ago, we were really looking at. I was looking at being more involved. I was doing training in counseling, and part of that work was understanding how race and sexuality like intersect with how we feel wellness, right? And so I really got into it there, and then I think the most striking experience for me was doing a Ken Hardy and Robin DiAngelo, who's a pretty famous author. Like they held a seminar in Oakland, which was 50% white and 50% people of color, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and and they could only add a white person if you added a BIPOC person. Like, so they wanted to have like a very equalized group, and it was absolutely fascinating. And I won't go too far into that, but when I got pulled aside by a doctor who was also biracial, and I'm a little more than 50% white, and she pulled me aside and she said, you're a bridge, right? And I kind of like was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, you can live in both worlds. You can live in the BIPOC world where people listen to you, and you can live in the white world where people listen to you, and you can be a bridge to helping people understand race and diversity. And it's that really like that was a moment where it just put me back, and I was like, oh,
Nice.
okay, I can't just be a good guy, right? I can't just be not, not racist, right? It's almost like, how do you be anti-racist? Like, and there's a book about that, about how to be proactive in that space to create more equity within like all of these fields that we're talking about. So that was probably the biggest one for me that really, and then when this opportunity came up, I was like, okay, I'll be vulnerable and take a risk. And it feels a little shaky to, take such a leading role, but it also felt right.
I like that. I hadn't heard that story about the bridge
Yeah.
metaphor, and that's powerful. I mean, it sounds like for you, it almost made it a little bit missional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, you have a pretty unique background based on from, again, that heritage, but then you were adopted and you have a cultural. You mind saying just a little about that part because people might not remember? And then what has this conversation meant to you?
It's very it's eye-opening, and I'm learning a lot. So quick story background with me: I'm by birth I am I believe fully Samoan, but I was adopted at birth by parents who were of Jamaican and Chinese descent. We lived in a very diverse community, and I was surrounded by a lot of cultures. And growing up, I never thought anything of it. I mean, I grew up around a lot of mixed races, and it was fun. I didn't know any different. I feel like I grew up and I had blinders on until there were issues, growing up with, there were just issues, and part of it led to, I guess, even some cultural stuff, I guess, instances that happened to me. And it just, I almost feel like I become blinded to it sometimes. But now growing up and hearing people's stories, it's eye opening. So I'm learning a lot through the DEI. So it's been good.
Yeah, it's almost. Well, first and foremost, you missed a huge part. You were the party DJ. Like, you had all the records. You're out there scratching and mixing on the streets, right?
Yeah, I did that for a while because that was fun.
But a lot of times it's almost equated. It can almost be equated, like what you were saying specifically in my mind. What came to the forefront was somebody who might be in almost an abusive relationship. Like, it becomes normalized and they don't recognize the things. Oftentimes it's psychological or mental in that. And it almost takes somebody from the outside to point out that these things aren't necessarily right, but you can't necessarily always see it in the moment. And when you were talking about blinders on, that was almost what came to my mind of you just almost become accustomed to it. And, unfortunately, that's not right.
Well, it is, and that's kind of what I'm saying, and that's why I'm learning a lot more. Because growing up in a kind of a really diverse community, I saw a lot of it, and I become blind to a lot of it. It's like, oh, that's normal. It was normalized, and it shouldn't be. Even from the way we talk, the way some of the conversations we have, to the way we treat each other. Even growing up now, I go back home and I see friends, and even the conversations are different,
Yeah. Davina, your family, my family are incredibly close. We've been partners for such a long time, and you're one of the most well-adjusted people that I know. And Steve used the word blinders, and I really vividly remember when the conversation was starting last year, that was one of the words that was really keyed up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Steve talks, I feel like there definitely is a common ground there in regards to feeling and how I grew up. I mean, I grew up in a Black home. I grew up basically in a Black community, but our communities were very separated, and it was normal. Like, Black people lived here, white people lived here, Asian here, Hispanics here, and we actually had different areas that we called those specific areas where people live, people of color. We were all, segregated in the community that I lived in. And the thing is that it wasn't, things have been felt normal. I mean, they weren't right, but it was a normal thing. When a lot of and we talk about growing up, and my parents owned property, and I grew up with the understanding that you buy a house, you own a house. But a lot of my friends, generationally, their families rented, and and I didn't understand, as even as we were growing up, and I didn't even, and a lot of things are like aha moments, like, oh my gosh, like we were completely programmed, just with our experiences, that this is just normal. And, people would even some of my friends growing up would say, and I didn't know the difference in ownership or not, when I was really young, but people, some of my friends they'd make comments, about, well, you're not black, black people don't live like this, I mean, and it's like, and understanding you're just not really getting it. And yeah, just having those blinders on for so long because things just seemed, normal. My black brothers that, I know that as a now looking back as a black female and looking at how my brothers were concerned about driving their cars and being pulled over, and that was normal, um, and it just uh, conversations have really really changed, and they have been uncomfortable even for me because I've, as a person of color, as a black female, I've had people actually come up to me and apologize and say, "I'm sorry." And I'm like, "For what?" It's like, "Well, because you're black and you're the only black person I know. And I need to say I'm sorry." I mean, it's like, wow, um, it's been real. It really has,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and your experience isn't that different. And when we were starting to have some of these conversations, even within, I think Lennox was great when these conversations were starting. He and the whole leadership team inside of John L. Scott began reaching out to a lot of individuals of, multi-ethnic
Mhm.
to begin having internal conversations. And the conversations weren't to just talk about, let's just talk about our feelings because we know, and feelings certainly came out, and it was almost surprising some of the hurt that so many people really had around this.
Yeah.
But the conversation was really around what can we do to better be inclusive or honor all people to make sure that whatever's happened, that we're a part of the solution, not perpetuating the issues that are continuing to go on. And one of the first things, Josh, you'd mentioned like doing a book study, and they can be really eye-opening. One of the first things they did with a large group of office leaders and other people within John L. Scott was to go through a book study with The Color of Law. And that was just, if somebody out there has not read The Color of Law, as a real estate agent, it is a really hard read because it points the spotlight very directly at how real estate has perpetuated, even with in the early goings, the realtors really perpetuated what was going on with segregation, redlining, and those types of things, and then coming up with potential options for solutions that they're progressive for sure, and they're kind of a little hard to swallow sometimes because it talks about really doing things different, not just from a words perspective, but from an actions perspective. And that's not easy, is it?
Mm-hmm.
No, that is, you hit the nail on the head. And I was just queuing up to kind of say that, was, like none of this stuff progresses within just learning, and that's why it's important to have, real conversations with the leadership of brokerages in Thurston County and in Washington. Like not only, okay, you can be aware of it, but we all know, like, oh, here's a training. Okay, I have to do this training because it's required for something, and you're in it and you learn, but then you have to be able to put this into action, and that also is really hard because it has to be put into action with people who are in power, and that can be very difficult because power comes from longevity in the market, age, like the people who are at the top generally have been operating just fine, and they've been successful with how they've been doing it.
Yeah.
So why, like, I mean, look at my brokerage. I got 45 brokers under me, and like we're we're doing great. So why change? If it ain't broke, but like that's kind of the key. And I think Davey now was talking about it, it's invisible. Like the systemic racism or segregation or whatever of like that's been put into place especially in America and other places as well, it's invisible unless you are willing to dig through the curtains a little bit and have a look, but it's you have to be willing to do it, and it's painful to do it a little bit because you have to be able to reflect on your own actions, and it's invisible. And that's the hard part, is that no, there's nothing on the law that says that this is illegal or
or it's the way we've always done it. I mean, why would I?
Yeah,
it's always been okay. When I was a kid, I could say that. Why? And I grew up just fine. Why?
Right. Yeah, and that's awareness, right? Mm-hmm. And part of that awareness is that, hey, things are changing. Hey, there's people that were once invisible or could not be seen or did not want to show themselves because it would be detrimental to their life or their business or whatever, so they just kind of played this part. And now that there's more people coming up and saying, hey, we need to change this, even more people join the conversation that were once unable to feel safe in that space.
Yeah, I think you're kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit there too, which is,
we're nailing it. That's how we roll.
See, and a lot of people have had voices, but they've been afraid to have their voices heard because you're right. I mean, there's this undercurrent of don't rock the boat. And if you say that, you're going to be controversial. And it's not, you can't say that in the company you're in. And that could be social company, it could be a business company. I mean, because nobody else is going to like that. And you're going to make yourself different. You're going to make yourself stand out.
But you may think that people don't like it. And you said it, you'll make yourself stand out, right? Which feels vulnerable, but also may attract all these other people and clients. And, from a real estate perspective, like people who are like, oh, she gets it. I want to use her, like it feels, because it's different. It feels like it could impact your business, but it may impact it and probably will impact it in a positive way, I think.
Yeah. Well, the numbers would say it. We were just talking about ahead of this that there was a study recently about diverse companies versus non-diverse companies. And the more diverse the company is, the more likely it is that they're going to be more profitable, more active by at least those numbers. I forget the study, but it was like 15 to 35% more productive than companies that are not diverse and really are just singular. And, you also mentioned within this, race is one thing. And I think inherently we've kind of understood race a little bit, but there's the newer recognition and conversation about LGBTQ that has definitely had to shake and change a lot of minds, or at least perceptions.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And they have gotten a lot of traction, over the last 45 years.
Yeah. And one of the things I think, and this is actually like kind of like the doing something, I think that we need to learn more and have a better understanding of culture in general, because what happens is when we're around people that aren't like us, or maybe not speaking the same language, or maybe it's not having the same beliefs, we tend to stay. I mean, it's human nature to stay comfortable. Like our bodies want us to stay comfortable, right? And when we are around or in an environment that is, or have an opportunity to go to something that's not comfortable or something that's comfortable, we tend to stay comfortable. And that's people that maybe think like us, that look like us, that we're comfortable with because we've been around them before. And this is where the change and the be bold comes in is leaning and having opportunities to be around people that are different, maybe look different, maybe speak differently, maybe have different thoughts or beliefs that maybe we are challenged with, so that we can learn and we can understand, we can have a level of respect, and we can wrap our arms around each other, knowing that, you know what, hey, we all bleed the same blood. We just are wired differently, and we need to understand those differences in order to come together. And I think that's the hard thing, is that how do you get to a point where that's comfortable, and where do those opportunities show up? So, you know, and that's the challenge, is getting uncomfortable. And Josh made that right in the beginning, you know.
Staying in it. And when it gets uncomfortable, not backing away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a quote. I think it's a John Maxwell quote, you know, listening with the intent to understand. There's a portion of it I'm missing. You know, most people speak with the intention to be heard, but not to understand what other people are doing. And that's one of the things we probably need to be aware of too, is we're having conversation. I don't think at the beginning of the conversations, I was actually listening as much as I was talking. That I had a point of view that I understood that was comfortable to me, and my understanding of things came from that. And I was more likely to filter everything I brought in through there, and I would find the parts that worked to the narrative that I had. And then not consciously, but I would be probably much more dismissive of the things that didn't fit the understanding that I had. As everything continued to go forward, I definitely started being much more intentional about how I was listening and also what I was doing. So the book study with the Color of Law was a really, really eye-opening thing. And a lot of the things I was reading in there were uncomfortable, incredibly uncomfortable to think about being engaged in the industry and the things that were going on, no, that can't be quite right, because that's not how I grew up. That's not what I saw. But I had to really start opening myself up to everybody else's perspectives to really start to change the mind. And so, yeah, the conversation is great, but really starting to listen for intentionally to understand somebody else's story or life is incredibly important too.
Yeah. And this is great, just to have this platform to just talk. And we've just literally talked right past 9 o'clock. Excuse me. And I guess we do need to kind of wrap. Wrap. I'll beatbox. Steve, you got the but you know, there is a way to get involved, and there's many ways to get involved. Like, once, contact your local realtor association if you're a realtor. I mean, there's definitely different ways to connect. And putting that plug in, Josh, how does anyone, if you're a realtor, you're in the Thurston County, and you're just curious about, wanting to make a difference, wanting to be a part, what does someone need to do?
So as the DEI committee really starts to get formed, I believe we're going to, take some applications to join, just like the Washington Realtors Association has an application to join the DEI committee. I just filled that out. That deadline was October 15th for the Washington Realtors, so that one's passed. But I think the first thing is just to keep your eye on it and subscribe to, looking into it on a daily basis. They did change the Thurston County, the TCRA site to include DEI work. The Washington Realtor Association has a link now at their own page with DEI work. I think that's definitely part of that first step. You can definitely reach out to me.
And even within John L. Scott, there is jlsfordiversity.com that.
Yep. And there's an event coming, or there's training coming, there's one, I think it's The Power of Diversity, I believe it's called. And one of the speakers is Dr. Lee Davenport. And she's actually written a book about real estate and race. And I haven't read that one yet, and it's definitely on my, I've signed up for the course. It's November 2nd and 3rd. And it's 3 hours a day. And I think she's probably going to speak on the second day, maybe. But there's a number of speakers, and they're just going to get into some of these topics about how we can be better realtors and how we can be better humans and Americans living together and creating this opportunity for people. And so, yeah, we're going to continue to have events like we did within Thurston County. Maybe once every couple months. It's a little more challenging as we'd like to meet outside. So as the weather turns, it's becoming more challenging. But it's definitely, as spring and summer come, we're going to try to get people together to have these conversations. And so, we're going to probably have an email list, and, just I think how you get involved in Thurston County is the same way you get involved with any kind of DEI work, which is look for it and continue to step in. I think those are the two pieces that, you have to continue to step in. Oh, it's uncomfortable. Let me back away for a little bit. Let me regain my sense of center. Okay, step back in and do the work. I think it will benefit any realtor to do more of this work and have a better understanding about where people are coming from.
Yeah. Josh, this has been, Jurgen, did you?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this has been an awesome conversation. We will definitely have to pick this up again, and probably bring on another opportunity to bring on Sandy McKenzie, the DEI chair of Washington Association of Realtors. So we'll get that rescheduled, and we'll definitely pick this up, because this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, and I have to say, also thank you to you, Josh, Steve, Davina, and everybody else that's been a part of all of this conversation, because unfortunately without it, I know for myself that even though I'm of mixed heritage as well, my perceptions tend to line more down the middle than to the outskirts of it. And there's no way I would have picked up the book of Color of Law or been engaged in so many conversations if it weren't for this coming to the forefront. And even though it's incredibly uncomfortable, because I'm happy just feeding in, and a lot of people are just feeding in an echo chamber of what they already believe and understand. And by being exposed and being intentional about getting engaged in things that are different from my understanding, different from my experiences, has really been a good thing for me, my spirit, and just my better understanding of everyone around me. And I feel definitely I'm a better person for it.
And your brokerage is better too. For that work. It is.
Yeah.
Like, look how many people are just from your JLS talent are involved in the Thurston County DEI committee.
Yeah.
Like, we make up a good portion of that committee because we're having these conversations in-house, and then, we want to get involved in a bigger setting. So I really appreciate the work that you are both doing. All three of you are doing as the leadership of JLS. And it's one of the reasons I joined John L's Got Talent in the first place. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And Davina? Davina got anything to wrap us up?
Some wrapping paper. We'll just wrap it up and tie it in a bow.
Put a little bow on it.
People are already talking about putting Christmas music on. My sister's like, I was feeling the funk yesterday, and I'm putting Christmas music on, and I was like, oh my gosh. She's already watched one of the Hallmark movies. Like, she's already leaning into it.
It is that season. Yeah, I mean, I know that we I tend to be the feel good one, wanting to just kind of put a little cherry on it. And I just think that we're in a really good in a space where we're having those conversations. And I think we just need to keep one foot in front of the other. And you know what? we may have to take a step or two back.
Yep.
But you know what? As long as we just take a couple steps forward, we might have to take a step back, take a couple steps forward. And I think we're moving in the right direction. And we have been for a number of years, but I think now things have just become a lot clearer for a lot of different people. And I think it opens up the door for opportunity, and we just have to step through it. So it's good.
That's the action.
Yeah.
All right, gang.
This is just, we're different. I think we're late for a meeting that we're all like, most of us are supposed to be on right now.
Yeah.
Not me. I'm right on time.
Right on time. So
all perspective.
Yeah, I think we're gonna just wrap it up. I feel like we just need to wrap it up with a big, huge be bold. And you know what? I think that we talk about what be bold means every week, multiple times during a week, every meeting we talk about it. And this really is an example of how and what being bold really means, like getting outside that comfort zone. And we can do so much better. Everyone, we could do so much better with being bold, with getting outside of our own selves and what makes us feel safe and the illusion of that. And I would just encourage us all today to think about what it is we could do one small thing, because it's, we talk about the things, and it doesn't have to be, if all of us does something small and we're consistent with it, we're going to make a huge change in a matter of time. And what can we do, that one small thing, to just be bold? And I think we should really go out with it this day and really think about that.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Josh, why don't you count us down, since you're the guest host?
Okay. Well, let's do it in 3, 2, 1.
Be bold.
All right. Appreciate everyone so much.
Yes. And we will see you guys next week.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Thank you for coming on. That was great.
Yes.
Bye.
All right. Bye.